Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be covering a little bit about special education, IDEA in particular. To start off a little bit, IDEA and Section 504 are two of the laws that cover children with disabilities and the educational services that they receive. Under IDEA, in order to qualify for a disability, you not only have to be diagnosed with a learning challenge, but it also has to actually impact your classroom experience. So for some students who are, let's say, ADD or ADHD, they may qualify or be diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, but since it doesn't impact their educational attainment inside the classroom, they're not eligible to receive services. In those cases, they become what we call Section 504, where in that case, you just have to have evidence of a disability, but the requirements as far as what you provide for children are drastically different between IDEA and Section 504. So the disabilities that we're covering today are specifically disabilities that are covered under IDEA. Section 504 covers a lot more than IDEA covers. So under IDEA, there's 13 categories that are recognized under the federal law. Specifically, the specific learning disability is the most disability that you'll find inside of your classrooms. Those are kids with dyslexia, dysgraphia, reading comprehension or written expression difficulties. All of that kind of comes under the title of specific learning disability, followed then by speech or language impairments, so articulation, kids who may have trouble forming their R's or their S's or their TH or their Z's. And then you'll see you have other health impairment is the next largest category after that. Actually, other health impairment, or OHI, is where ADD and ADHD fall. ADD and ADHD do not have their own category. They are considered an other health impairment. And then you see mental retardation, which is now called intellectual disability, and then emotional disturbance, followed by autism, which again has been renamed to autism spectrum disorders, or ASD, rather than autism. A few notes about learning disabilities or disabilities in general. With OHI, specifically ADD and ADHD, and ASD, autism spectrum disorder, 80% of the kids who are identified in those two areas are male. Whereas in the other disability categories, it's about 50-50 across the board. So intellectual disability, speech, specific learning disabilities, you'll see about the same amount of boys as you do girls. But in autism and in ADHD, you see 80% of the kids who are identified as being male. So I think that's kind of interesting and something to pursue a little bit further as far as why that's the case. The other resource that I wanted to share with you was about the bell curve located here. And the bell curve is important when you're identifying kids with learning disabilities because the bell curve comes into play when you're actually identifying them. And so what do I mean by that? Well, most of the kids are falling in this average range that you find here right in the middle with their IQ. So an average IQ is anywhere between 85 and 115. And again, kids can fall anywhere within that spectrum. Typically, your gifted kids fall about the 130 and above IQ range, and typically your intellectual disability is 70 and below. However, with gifted identification and intellectual disability identification, there's more than just the IQ test to identify. So you're looking at other social emotional issues, you're looking at parent feedback questionnaires usually. So it's not just an IQ test to identify intellectual disability and gifted spectrum either. So that's kind of where your various kids lie on that bell curve. But what I wanted to point out specifically is for specific learning disabilities, so reading comprehension or written expression, how you identify those types of disabilities is a child has to show some sort of strength. So maybe the child in spatial awareness or mathematical computation might fall up here at the 115 range, maybe a high achiever. However, with their achievement score, so they're giving you an IQ test, but they're also giving you an achievement test, which means IQ measures your potential for cognition learning. Achievement measures what you actually know at this moment of time. And so to identify a child with a specific learning disability like reading comprehension, what you'll find is they'll show a strength in one particular area like spatial awareness or mathematical computation, but then they have a really, really low achievement score somewhere else. For example, maybe reading comprehension or written expression, or maybe long-term retrieval, which means that they have trouble storing and then retrieving that information back. So that's what you have to find with a child with a specific learning disabilities. There has to be that spread. What happens, unfortunately, and these are the kids my heart really goes out to, is you might have a child who maybe falls in this 85-90 range as far as IQ, but their achievement also kind of falls within 85-90, maybe even 80 range for achievement. But there isn't that gap that exists between their IQ and their achievement score, which just means they're a struggling learner. And with those struggling learners, they're going to continue to probably struggle in school and face challenges with learning, but there aren't any identifiable disabilities when they don't have that spread between IQ and achievement to be able to receive the educational services to help support them in the classroom. So a child that's kind of on that bubble are the ones that are just going to struggle in school, and you hope that they'll stick with it over time and have a teacher every year who recognizes that they just need some extra help even though they don't have an IEP. So anyway, that's kind of how you identify in a nutshell some of the specific learning disabilities. And of course, with the other disabilities mentioned in this other graph, there's significant testing, there's surveys, there's questionnaires for parents, for teachers, sometimes with pediatricians, to identify some of these other areas as far as qualifications. So again, other health impairments, kind of a catch-all for various things. It could even be diabetes. However, that other health impairment must impact their educational potential inside of the classroom. So it has to impair their ability to learn at the same level as other children in some way. So I hope that gives you a little bit more information that you need as far as how kids are identified and what those specific learning disability areas are. There's obviously a lot more resources out there for you that you could utilize to help you in this week's activity as well.